Brooklyn Nets aren't very good, but what the Pelicans did in the first quarter allowed them to cruise to an easy win. The best part, you can do this in games against good teams too. Let's break down the win in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider Credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NolaJake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Wednesday, day after the Pelicans beat the Brooklyn Nets 112-85. About as easy of a victory as the Pelicans were going to get in this one, and they looked good. Now, the Brooklyn Nets aren't good. They're playing some real bad basketball right now. But what the Pelicans did in this game, particularly in the first quarter, is something that they can replicate against other teams. So I want to break that down because it's on both offense and defense and with the energy that they brought. So we're going to look at a very complete game for your New Orleans Pelicans in this one. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday. We are the number one Pelicans podcast for the insight that you want right here. So let's get into this victory for the Pelicans. Again, about as easy as it comes, 112-85. But really, when you watch this team in the first quarter, they set the tone. One, winning that frame 32-18. But it really comes down to a couple of things they did that they then continued throughout the rest of the game and cruised to an easy victory. But it starts with the three-point shooting. The Pelicans, who we've said need to take more threes. It makes things easier for Zion Williamson, for Brandon Ingram, for even CJ McCollum and the rest of this team. Shoot more threes, it leads to good things. Well, they went 6 of 9 in the first quarter of this game. And when you look at it, their first 4 buckets were three-pointers. The first play, and this is easy offense here, was Zion driving, getting the ball in the paint, drawing defenders, drove, kicks it out to Brandon Ingram, who took the three. Third bucket of the game was Zion to CJ McCollum for 3. It was inside out basketball. The second one was CJ to Jonas Valanciunas on a driving kick. Third basket was Zion in the paint, draws defenders. CJ is just planted his feet on the three-point line. Z kicks it out to him. It's easy inside out basketball. Fourth made 3 of this quarter was CJ to Brandon Ingram. B.I. has a little off-ball movement, a flare screen where he goes to the open spot on the wing. CJ just gets him the ball there after a screen had been set. Very easy, simple offensive sets that the Pelicans used to just generate threes, and it opened everything up. You know, they take some of the fewest amount of threes in the league. They've needed to take more. It opens things up for Zion Williamson. It opens things up for Brandon Ingram to be lethal from mid-range because now teams are closing out harder on these guys. And it also helps you when, say, Zion gets in foul trouble. Only played 5 minutes in the first quarter because of 2 early fouls. You know, he was a little bit limited in this game, not that they needed him to be particularly good, but oftentimes when Zion Williamson leaves the game, you know, you run into a lot of trouble. And the Pelicans, even with him in early foul trouble, kept things going, kept their offense being exactly how you want it to be. You know, we'll get into some of these numbers in the next segment here when we look at the defense and that leading to good offense for the Pelicans and other things that they were doing. You know, they had 12 made shots in the first quarter. They had 7 assists. Those are good numbers there, right? All 6 of those three-pointers were assisted on. That's moving the basketball. That's guys being in the right place at the right time. You know, that's team chemistry being developed when you looked at some of the real simple actions between these guys together. So, yeah, the Brooklyn Nets stink. They're not, they're not horrific. They're playing some bad basketball right now. That is for sure. They definitely need to kind of entirely reboot their team, I think. And now this makes 4 in a row in terms of losses for them. However, You can do all of this against good teams. The Pelicans came in, and we'll talk about it more in the third segment here, with the right energy in this game, something they've really needed to do. But when you hear them talk a little bit after the game, you start to get an idea and think that maybe their heads truly are in the right place here. But with the kind of ball movement and things they were doing, none of this is just like the Nets are trash and you're not going to be able to do this against good teams. Getting Zion in a little bit of space and allowing him to drive into the lane, drawing defenders, and then kicking it out to good shooters for three. BI is a good shooter, right? CJ is a good shooter. He had 2 assists in the first quarter. Again, limited minutes, 2 assists in 5.5 minutes. Pretty good. And one was to Brandon Ingram, one was to CJ. That's perfect. When you have Trey Murphy out there too, who's still out in this game, that's going to be lethal. If Jordan Hawkins gets long-term minutes for this team, and he took a lot of shots in this, which is what you want to see, didn't make them, but took them, I think that's a good thing. You can see how deadly this really could be when you surround him with good shooters. And you probably don't need to sacrifice that much on the defensive side of the ball. We'll talk about that in the next segment. So what they did in this game with the three-point shooting coming out basically like guns blazing essentially, and they start hitting those shots, build some confidence. Brandon Ingram going 2 for 2 from 3 with an assist from Zion and CJ is exactly what you want to see. Eventually, teams leave Jonas Valanciunas open. He can make those on occasion. You don't have a problem with that. He had an easy game in this one, really, when you think about him. Herb Jones is making his shots, too. And then you have some of the bench guys that are making them. Jose Alvarado is shooting the ball really well this season. He even joked the other day saying, he's barely 6 foot, so he better be able to shoot a little bit. But when he goes 3 of 6, you're going to be in a much better position. When Herb Jones goes 2 of 4, you're going to be in a good position. Larry Nance Jr. is taking more threes. He's making them at a decent rate, too. He made one in this game. Dyson Daniels in his run made a 3. You had Jordan Hawkins make 2. He was 2 of 8. But we want the rookie shooting because that's only going to lead to good things in the future and our developmental minutes for him. So this team did exactly what they need to be doing. They've barely been taking, slightly over 33s per game. They took 39 in this one. They hit 16 of them. They were 17 for 34 in the game the other night too, another win. So when they start taking more threes and then thus making more threes because they have some shooters here, yeah, you're really tough to beat. And this extends beyond just bad teams like the Brooklyn Nets. This can apply to good teams too, which they're going to face tonight. If you're listening to this on Thursday, if you're listening to this on Wednesdays, they're on the second night of a back-to-back against the Minnesota Timberwolves, the top team, and they've held this spot for something like 40-plus days in the Western Conference. So you want to be able to make sure you're kind of clicking, and this team definitely is in terms of the three-point shooting. There's a couple of other things they're doing well, right? I have it listed here, if you're watching on YouTube, as good defense leads to easy offense, but it's about some other things too that I really want to get into that I'm looking forward to talking about. Pace, defense, fast break, all of that. Something the Pelicans are doing very, very well, did very well in this game, did very well the other night. I want to break that down coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about FanDuel. The NFL season is wrapping up. The NBA season is right underway, so there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. It's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, of whatever your $5 bet is. And I love the app because it's so easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet. You want the spreads, the over-unders, the player props, the live in-game betting. Someone's hot, take their over on 3-pointers made. And you can find new bets in the Explore tab and make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, which is the best way to find popular parlays. And there's so many other things. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL and the official sportsbook of Locked On. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. For your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, let's continue to talk about the Pelicans beating the Brooklyn Nets 112-85, where they just straight up smoked them. This was about as easy of a victory as the Pelicans are going to get this season. And it wasn't because the opponent's bad, the Nets aren't good, but it really was the Pelicans just taking charge of this game and kind of doing things that they would describe as their identity. We just went over the three-point shooting that opens things up so much for them, but they did more than that. And when you look at this, and you heard Herb Jones talking about this, you heard Jose Alvarado talking about this too after the game, the players really seem to think that this really does matter, was getting out and playing with pace and playing with defense. So let's start with the defense in this one. They really limited the Brooklyn Nets. They knew what they were doing in this game. They held the Brooklyn Nets to 11 for 43 in terms of three-point shooting, right? Guys that normally want to go out and take a lot of shots, Royce O'Neal, Cam Thomas, some of the others there, they really did a good job of defending those guys and forcing them into taking just uncomfortable three-pointers, or going with a guy that's not the best three-point shooter in Spencer Dinwiddie and letting him take those shots. So they really limited what the Brooklyn Nets were trying to do. They had stout interior defense in this one and just made life really tough for them. And one of the things the Pelicans did in this game that they really liked to do, I thought, was also get out and run in a variety of different ways. So one, on the defensive side of the ball, I want to go back to that actually, is you're seeing everyone just put forth the right effort. The Pelicans have a top 10 defense this season. They had a top 10 defense last season as well. We went over the numbers over the last 10 games, not counting this, for the Pelicans the other day, and they have the third best defense over that span. They are a good defensive team, even with guys like Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram out there. Everyone, for the most part, not excusing anybody here, speaking about Zion, but we just did a show on how BI is stepping up on the defensive side of the ball and is trying more and harder than he ever has before. When you have guys making hustle plays like Jose Alvarado, who had another Grand Theft Alvarado in this one, yet it's still incredible that he can pull that sort of thing off. Making those hustle plays. Najee Marshall coming in and being chaotic good for this Pelicans team, right? Everyone doing their best to step up. Larry Nance Jr. back there, able to defend on the perimeter in crunch time in the way that they like, leads to very good things for the Pelicans here. And I love to see the effort that this team is putting in overall. It's why when you look at some of these guys, you don't think that they would do a good job or some lineups wouldn't be good defensively, but they are. It's really, defense is a lot about energy, effort, and just like giving a damn when it comes to it. And the Pelicans do on the defensive side of the ball. The other thing that they did, I thought, really well in this game was get out and run. Get out and run, whether that was off of turnovers from the Brooklyn Nets. They only had 12 in this game. Or after, misses, the Pelicans were out there sprinting. If they grabbed a defensive rebound, they were getting that ball and they were pushing the pace in transition if they could. Normally, you get into transition off of opponents' turnovers. They turn the ball over, say a live ball steal, you have a man advantage going the other way. They only had 12 turnovers in this one. The Pelicans had 19 points in the fast break. They weren't all off of turnovers. I'll be able to get some of the numbers in the next day or two per cleaning the glass, and I'm going to be kind of curious. But the Pelicans all season long have been doing this where even on a defensive rebound, you can get in transition and go. That's why we've been frustrated in those games where the Pelicans don't do a good job of defensive rebounding, because if all of a sudden they're not doing that, they can't get some of the easy points in transition that they want. When you look at it, if you're a longtime listener and if you're an everydayer, you hear me talk about points per possession or points per shot attempt or points per play, right? PPP is really kind of the metric that you use with that. We look at it with players, right? When Zion has 26 points on 12 shot attempts, that's insane efficiency compared to someone who, say, would score 18 points, which is still really good in this case, on 12 shot attempts, right? You kind of get the idea there. It's maximizing each possession that you get. You've heard me say that free throws, something the Pelicans are very good at drawing, is the most efficient shot. When you look at points per play type, free throws, isolation, pick and roll ball man, pick and roll ball handler, I can go on and on, spot up, right? Post up. Free throws are kind of number one in terms of efficiency because in general, other than, the Pelicans, because they're the Pels, shoot well from the free throw line. You don't have anyone contesting it. It's literally called a free throw, right? Charity stripe. So they tend to do well. Most teams tend to do well. The other option where you can get a really high points per shot attempt and thus you're kind of maximizing each possession is in transition. But it's hard to run when you're not forcing turnovers. The Pelicans have done a decent job of doing that this year, but they're also trying to run when they get those defensive boards. So when you get those defensive boards, which is defense, by the way, good defense leads to easy offense. You get a stop, you get the ball, and you get out and run before the defense gets set. When the defense gets set and kind of slows things down, you have to go through a number of different actions in the half court to manufacture good looks, right? And the Pelicans did that in the first quarter here with the 3-pointers that they generated, but that has been a problem for them throughout this season. It was a problem for them last year as well. So they don't want to be playing in the half court if they can avoid it. Why not just get out and run and get an easy shot at the rim, right? Think about, to end, more or less end the quarter, or right towards the end, was Herb Jones getting the steal, kicking it out to Najee Marshall in transition. The Smoothie King Center was kind of electric after that. Najee then took a three on the next possession, didn't make it, but that was after Jose had hit a three, all of those things. So when you can do that, it can make a guy like Najee Marshall, who's not, again, the most skilled player in the world in terms of just pure basketball skill, but he can get out and run and score, and he can generate some of those fast break opportunities for you with the rebounding. So Jonas being out there grabbing 9 defensive boards in this one. Brandon Ingram grabbing 4 defensive boards in this one. Even CJ McCollum rebounding well. Larry Nance Jr. grabbing those boards. All of that's going to allow them to get in transition and run and thus get easy points. And then you don't need to worry about 3-point shooting as much. One of the things I looked at and talked about last season, so if you're like a deep everydayer here, there's many of you who've even been with me since like the beginning of the show, I know. I talked about it. And it turns out we were wrong about it too, if they want to get out and run and play in transition all the time, you don't need to worry about 3-point shooting as much because you're generating easy points. Because then you don't need to worry about the spacing being mucked up in the half court. The problem was injuries and them not being able to get in transition as much as they wanted to last season. So being able to get in transition and running even off of misses, I think, is a really impressive feat by the Pelicans and exactly what you want to see. This is them saying we are a defensive team and we're going to just get good, easy offense after that. Sprinkle in some good off-ball action when they do play in the half court, and you have a runaway victory with this one, right? It's why when they can get out in transition, you've seen their kind of points explode over some of these games. They're just getting easy buckets. Yeah, you're going to score more points then, right? When you're being able to get easy buckets like that. For a team that has struggled at times in the half court, has relied on too many defensive lineups, that gets a little bit better than if you get out and run. So more of that, please. Push it after defensive rebounds, which means committing guys to doing all of that, but also some guys leaking out. It's finding the right balance. By leaking out, I mean they're trying to get in transition and run before that defensive rebound is secured. They have games when they try and do that a little too much, and that leads to those issues. But overall, they're a good defensive rebounding team, so keep doing what you're doing. Get in transition, get those easy buckets, because that's going to lead to just us not worrying about the offense whatsoever, just like we weren't worried about them in this game. So coming up next, let's talk about the energy that the team brought, because I think this is important too. These guys are really starting to feed off of one another. This all ties into, well, we'll talk about kind of the overall theme as well. Coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about Gametime. Buying tickets to events last minute can be frustrating, right? When I went to the Saints game in SoFi Stadium, was I going to get good seats? They're expensive. Am I getting the best price, right? All of those things are things that you worry about when it comes to buying tickets. And it's an expensive purchase and you want to have the best time. You don't want to have bad seats, right? Well, Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you peace of mind with your purchase. You get to see the view from your seats before you buy. I knew exactly where I was going to be sitting in SoFi Stadium. You get to see the all-in price up front. I checked other places too. You click on a ticket, that looks like a great deal, and then it's like double the price because of hidden fees. You get to see the all-in price up front, so you know you're getting a great deal with Gametime. And with a Gametime guarantee, you're always going to get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So I knew I could just buy those tickets if elsewhere they were cheaper in the same section and row. I was going to get the credit. Would have been completely fine. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code I use. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday for y'all, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday. We are the Number One Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now for your second listen, go check out Locked On Saints. Ross Jackson breaking down everything black and gold. There's a chance they can make the playoffs. There's a chance. I want them to beat Atlanta no matter what. He's going to be breaking it all down. Everything you want to know about the black and gold, Ross Jackson has you covered. Awesome dude. Make sure you go listen to the Locked On Saints podcast as your second listen. All right, Pelicans just run out against the Brooklyn Nets. This was great. Exactly what you wanted to see from this team. They are now 20-14. That's a good record, right? That's putting them in contention for a top 4 spot right now, depending on what happens with other teams with, in the Western Conference, in a tough Western Conference. The theme of this show has kind of been they did a lot of things right in this, but overall, I think, what they did right in this game, you can replicate against other teams too. It doesn't have to just be a bad team like the Brooklyn Nets. You can push after grabbing an offensive or after a defensive board. You can get Zion into the paint, use his court gravity where he draws 3-4 defenders at times to manufacture open looks for your other good 3-point shooters in CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram on offense. And to his credit, Brandon Ingram is taking more 3-pointers. And look how everything is just working smoother with that. CJ is making himself available on the perimeter to be a spot-up threat, which is better than him working on ball, I think. And he's going back to that role, something he often did with the Portland Trail Blazers too. So all of these guys are kind of sacrificing, playing for one another, doing the team things they need to be doing, and it's leading to them having just the right kind of energy. For a big chunk of this season, would you say the starters came out flat? A pause for dramatic effect here. I would say there were a lot of games where the starters just didn't look interested in playing basketball, and the bench mob, guys like Jose Alvarado, Najee Marshall, when he was playing before he was injured, now healthy again, Larry Nance Jr., all adding to that and really helping this team kind of get the energy level back. But again, when you have Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and CJ McCollum, your starters should be winning their minutes and getting you leads, and it should be the bench that you're just please don't completely blow it. If your bench can keep you even, right? You didn't lose any points, you didn't gain any points against an opponent. With a top-heavy team like this, you feel really good about that. But the bench was kind of bailing the starters out, bailing out this team with their energy, with the level of play. It's why you haven't seen a reduction in minutes for guys like Najee Marshall or Jose Alvarado when you do want to give developmental minutes to a guy like Jordan Hawkins. Or when, as Jose said, he's a little undersized here. But when they bring that kind of energy and they just make plays that make other dudes go all out, and Zion has referred to this, that when Jose has a big moment, the team kind of feeds on it, that works. But you also want the starters to have some of that kind of mentality that, I don't know if it's a killer instinct or whatever. It's just kind of give up, bleep, about winning the game. You saw that from them in this game, I thought. I thought you saw that from them against the Los Angeles Lakers on New Year's Eve too, where they showed they weren't going to get kind of embarrassed. And that's where you look at that Lakers loss in the in-season tournament, 44-point loss, where they were embarrassed on national TV. And embarrassed is the right word. We did an angry cast after that game. They seem to take that message to heart, right? They were 7-3, so I guess technically they're 8-3 over their last 11 games now here. Looking like they're playing some of the best basketball I saw, and maybe we need to do a roundup of power rankings with them. I saw Mark Stein's Steinline Substack, which is well worth subscribing to, paying for. He had them ranked 10th or 11th out of all 30 teams. So he was saying this is a top 10 team right now with how they've played over the past month, because he does his monthly. This team has found kind of the right mentality. They're committed on the defensive side of the ball. They are finding some improvements with their offensive game. You really saw it here in this one, kind of epitomizing everything the Pelicans want to do. If they're capable of carrying that all forward, this team is going to be very tough to beat. There's enough talent here, and they did these past 2 games without Trey Murphy. I'm hopeful he'll play tonight against the Minnesota Timberwolves. We'll see. But overall, that has to be encouraging for this team that they're doing this. And again, they're still not reaching their peak. This is something we talked about on the show if you're an everydayer, right? This is why you want to be an everydayer so you don't miss this stuff. It's good they haven't peaked. It's good that they have still potential to be reached. It's disappointing when they don't hit that, certainly, but you don't want to be looking at them like you look at, say, another team and be like, yeah, that's what this team is. This is exactly who they are. They're not that good, or what have you. Here, you know that there's so much more room for them to get better, and that is frightening when they're trending towards being a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. Only team in the top 5 is the Boston Celtics, I think. No other team has that. I don't know if New Orleans is going to end up with being a top 5 offense, top 5 defense. I think they're going to get in the running for it. You might end up with the 4th best defense, 5th best defense, and the 8th best offense, and all of a sudden you're sitting pretty when it comes to that. So when these guys bring this sort of energy, when they play together like a team and they're doing more of that, you're seeing some of the chemistry get built on the court, some of the trust get built on the court. There are limitations. There are going to be definite issues for this team at times, but you're seeing him come in with the right kind of mentality. Jose Alvarado said after this game, it was good that we got the starters some rest, that we got other guys some rest with a big game coming up tonight now against the Minnesota Timberwolves, best team in the West. And they realized that, you couldn't take this game for granted. They didn't want to look past it. They wanted to take it seriously. They did that, check, right? But also midway through the game, when you could take your foot off the gas and just kind of conserve energy and cruise, they said, no, let's keep going. Let's blow this team out. And then Zion, B.I., CJ, some of these guys don't need to play in the fourth quarter. I love that from this team. They haven't always had that mindset. You would probably say they play down to the level of their competition pretty often. They didn't do that here against the Brooklyn Nets. That's encouraging. That's seeing a team that's growing, that's seeing a team that if they do put all this together is going to be very scary. Now let's see what they do against the Timberwolves on the road, tough environment against a very good team. This stretch of schedule is tough for the Pels, but to go out and get this win, which is when you look at their schedule this month, there's 2 gimmies. This was one of them. Good job taking care of business. Good job putting yourself in the best position to succeed against the Minnesota Timberwolves. So I'm excited about the direction this team's heading. Maybe we'll look at all the power rankings and see kind of the differing opinions on the Pelicans. Maybe we can play Mythbusters or something like that. It's a good idea. Let me know if you like that idea, and we'll maybe do a show on that sometime this week or early next week. Let me know in the comments down below on YouTube. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. I'll be back with y'all tomorrow to recap the game.